Hello, everybody. Now, our next phase is runtime validation. This is going to be the process of correcting this rig to make sure that it will work properly in Unity. The first step is pretty simple. You're just going to have your rig highlighted and you're just going to run the step. And it's tried its best to parent all the bones that it can. It does a pretty good job, but sadly, it's not perfect. So it will have parented the hair joints. I know from prior experience, the hair joints have been properly parented, the finger joints mostly, but sadly, the legs and all these loose pieces will not be parented to anything. And so this you can run this step a couple times. It doesn't really do anything different. But once you do, go ahead and mark that step incomplete. And now we have to manually go in and correct all the things that remain. And this brings us to the next step. So go ahead and press expand next step. And this will bring us to the real meat and taters of the entire modding experience. The reason why I laugh is it's not hard, it's just annoying. And this is where people might stumble and get a little frustrated, but it's it's nothing that hard. Just turn on some music and just go through the process. And what we're going to be doing here is looking at the fact that all these bones, if we go to edit mode and like we click on one of these, come up to the outliner, right click, view, show active, you can see all these different bones. Now, this is not the way a rig should look. You want things to be parented to one another. And you can see that some of these are already having some parent associations, and you can tell by these little carrots. When you click on them, it shows that other bones belong to them, such as the hand having all these different finger bones, and those finger bones extending, and they have all these different children. That's what the entire rig needs to look like, and there should be one top level bone. Right now, all these bones, go into object mode and run this step. Okay, it's running a couple errors. Oh, it says over here, runtime armature has 100 top level bones. Our job is to reduce that to one. And this is pretty simple. However, it can get kind of confusing and cluttered, and I'm going to guide you on some tips on to make it less painful. Now, there's two types of parenting, connected and offset. You have offset bones. They're just kind of floating around like these little tiny red ones around here. That bone, technically, should be parented to this nearest blue bone. And if we go through this process of parenting, we click the child, the one we want the child, and we click on the one we want the parent. Sorry, we shift click. Ah, we have an issue. There is a hidden bone underneath that is sometimes being highlighted when I click on it. To fix this issue, we need to see underneath it. If you come down to here, toggle X-ray. It might not be here on your screen. It might be up here on the top left or top right. But it's these little spheres. You want to toggle the X-ray mode, and you can see that there's another little bone in there. So back to my original point, we're going to parent this bone to this bone. And if I do Control P, it has these two options. Because it's floating away and it is offset, that one is me keep offset. And you'll notice that something changed over here. That bone went away. The opposite side bone also went away as well. It has symmetry. So as I parent this bone, that bone over there will make the same proper and respective parent relationship to this bone. Now, a connected bone is something that has its head connected to the tail of another bone. Head and tail is as follows. The thin end of a bone, like right here, that is the tail. The large end of the bone, that is the head. So when you have two bones, like this bone and this bone, the tail of this bone overlaps the head of this one. This is a really good indication that these bones should be connected. Sadly, the prior step of running a runtime hierarchy did not work, but we can just easily manually fix this by clicking on the child, clicking on the parent, Control P, and press connected. So now we're going to begin our kind of annoying process of parenting everything. This is not hard, it's just annoying. And we're going to work our way towards the hips. In animation and rigging, the hips are always going to be the parent level, the topmost bone. Now, we're going to go ahead and inspect what the hips look like. And I chose this model as well because it's had several issues. It has an asymmetrical rig and it has a weird hip. And that's because it's an animation rig and they do, weird stuff. However, we need this to look different. We need this bone to not sprout out from the same bone as this one. This is the hips. You can sell its name right here. Hips def, hips over here. We want the head, which is going to be the thick end of that bone, to be at the bottom of the crotch. We want the tail of that bone to be roughly where it is now, pointing towards. And so, like for this one specifically, I'm going to switch its direction. And you'll notice that that has switched its overall direction. If I go back and undo it, you can see the difference. This is what we want. We want tip to butt. So we're going to click on that little head circle, not the whole bone, but just that little head circle, and we're going to move that into place. You don't want it to be like this. You want it to be perfectly straight up and down. So just use the green and the blue uh, arrows to kind of get yourself there. Now, this bone needs to be connected to this bone. And if I do connected, you'll notice that bone move. When you think a bone should be connected, but the bone moves, that means it should not be connected. It should look as if nothing happened. So because something happened, we know that this bone has not been properly overlapped on the other bone. That's fine. All we have to do is just set as a offset. So I'm going to keep offset. The same thing for these bones. No need to move them. Just keep them offset. Parent to child, work everything towards the hips. The head needs to be parented to the neck, the chest, the spine, to the hips or whatever. You just need to make sure that everything gets parented eventually to this. So, foot, the calf, the thigh, the hips. And as we do this process, all these bones over here will shrink down and eventually we'll be left with just the ones that are eluding us and that we can't find. And I'll get to that. We're going to go ahead and continue this process. Start with the feet connected. Did it move? No, we're good. These all seem connected. Those bones are already connected, it seems. If they're blank on both of them, we don't really want to mess with that. Now this hidden bone, I'm going to connect to that one. And those thigh bones to the hip. Oh, I pressed connected and they moved. Offset. I'm just going to do some of these bigger bones. We're going to go in logical order. We're not going to focus on these tiny little bones yet or the floating ones. We're just going to try and make sure we get most of the connected ones already figured out. Once we're connected. head, and we connect it to the neck, but not connected. Offset parent, and that neck will go to the chest. And as you see, our list is dramatically starting to shrink. So we're going to start now approaching the issue of all these little red ones, and they're annoying. And if you delete them, that's not exactly bad. It might result in some issues later that you have to correct, but I strongly recommend just parenting them to the bone that makes the most sense. At a later point, we might be able to add constraints to make these bones actually do something. So might as well just leave them around in that use case. We already parented this bone, that bone, I believe. Yep, it's offset. I'm going to teach you how to make this a little bit easier on yourself so you don't get lost with all these different bones. When we parent a bone and we no longer want to see it, we can simply hide it. And there's a couple ways we can do this. We can just press H when it's selected. Anything that's selected when we press H hides it. It's not deleted, it's still there, but we can just hide it with H. If we want to unhide things, we can do Alt H and it'll bring everything back. So we're going to hide that bone. Sorry, because we already did it. Now, let's say we don't want to have to re-highlight all these bones because let's say I highlight this bone, that bone, that bone, and say they're connected to this bone. I parent them. Keep offset, parent. Now if I hide it, well, it hid that bone as well, and that's not what we want. So an easy way is just click on bone, then the parent bone. Do your parent, keep offset in this case, hold down shift, click that parent bone, and it'll just deselect it. It'll keep all the other selections, and then you can hide the other bones by pressing H. So that way you don't have to click on everything twice. It's a bit annoying. Sometimes you click on just the head, and you need to make sure you click on the entire bone. Entire bone, parent, keep offset, shift click, hide. That way, we can keep clear what we've already have parented. We don't need to worry about the opposite side unless we see that there is something specific remaining on in our outliner. So we're just going to go ahead and do this as quickly as possible and just get it done. And so we've done that shoulder, knowing little spot. And now we can see that most of our list is now gone. And in our outliner, we see just the bones that remain. And right off the bat, we can see some things that we assumed that we had done, like the calf. There's a calf bone. And if we click on the outliner, it'll show us which bone it is in our top level. And that one we have not properly parented. So that one is a connection. Now we have all these other bones, and we can just do a quick. The ones that are highlighted, like there, are the ones that remain. Because this is an asymmetrical rig, we can see that on the other side, these bones over here are not on the other side over there. We can just go ahead and parent those, keep offset, hide, and now they're gone. That bone, this is probably already dealt with. Now we have these bracer bones. That one's already connected. Offset, hide those. And there's a little bone in there, I can just tell. Can't quite click it, so I'm just going to go down this list and see about, yep, there it is. And that one we're just going to assume is parented to that one. Keep offset, hide it. Those bones, we can just probably just use the outliner to select all of them, and then select the bone we want parented to, keep offset, hide them, and now we have one miscellaneous non-symmetrical shoulder bone on the opposite side. Keep offset. And just like that now, this step is more or less complete. If you were to look in the outliner, we have one hips level bone, just like that. And under that, all these other bones are parented. This is what we want. However, if we were to run this step right now, you would get an error. And that's expected. It's because we're in edit mode. We need to make sure that when we do this, we need to be in object mode. For you, this might be apologies. We want to make sure we're in object mode. Object mode might be up here. So we want to make sure in object mode, click on the rig, run step. Runtime armature has one level bone hips depth. Mark step as complete. And that was the worst part. And we can now expand that next step. And our next step is ensure runtime root bone. Now, a root bone is a top level buffer bone that is used by animation software and game engines to be a utility bone for, let's say, the location of a character. So we probably stripped that out. If it hasn't been, this step will be fine. But all it takes is just pressing this button. A bone will be created right here. It'll automatically be created with a specific length that is respective to the overall height of the character, where it should be. And that step is as simple as that. Arc step is complete. Expand next step. Now, this next step, bind meshes to runtime armature. All these meshes are still technically attached and working off of the old original animation rig. Now is the time that we take all these meshes and we instead make them follow this new rig. So if you were to just press on the rig and run step, sometimes it will show this rebound 0, skipped 0. That means it didn't actually register any meshes. The best way to do this is just press on a mesh. Not this armature, but a mesh, any of them that's attached or part of it, and run the step again. This time you can see rebound 18 skipped 0. Once it's done that, you can mark this step as complete, span next step, and now on this step, we have check runtime root hierarchy. You want to run this step, and it's just a simple check, and it has been completed. You can mark this step as complete, and that essentially has concluded the runtime validation phase. It's the hardest phase, and it's just annoying. At this point, though, what's rewarding is that we can now go into pose mode, click on your armature, come down to object mode. It's either going to be down here for you or up here, pose mode, and we can now start moving the character. If I click on the leg, bring out the rotation tool, I can now see how the leg might move. It's nowhere near as good as an animation rig, but it is functional. Yep, there we go.